dark history of Boyz to Men. Anybody growing up in the 90s was surely exposed to the sultry ballads of Boyz to Men. Their success brought R&B back into the mainstream, allowing a new generation of young minds to experience and appreciate all that Motown had to offer. I was no different. Fantasies about my first kiss with a special someone, set to what other than End of the Road, filled my burgeoning 13-year-old brain. When that very same song was playing during my first slow dance at middle school homecoming, I knew I had to go out and buy the CD to commemorate the occasion. The next time we went to the mall, I made a beeline for FYE. "For your entertainment," the store sign boasted. This isn't just entertainment, I thought. This is my life. I entered the store and headed for the hip-hop and R&B section. I scanned the racks. Babyface, Belle Biv DeVoe, Blackstreet. No. I began to panic a bit, worried that I would not be able to preserve my precious memory until, at last, I found it. Boyz to Men. I picked up a couple of the albums, flipped them over in my hands, searching frantically for the one that featured End of the Road. But I couldn't find it. I was confused. This was their biggest song by far, but it wasn't exactly new. Could they really still be sold out of this album? It seemed unlikely, but even beyond that, I was stubborn. I didn't want to believe that they didn't have it, that I had come in vain. I walked over to the cashier's counter to get to the bottom of things. "Hi, do you have the Boyz to Men album that has End of the Road on it?" The staff person raised an eyebrow uninterestedly and responded, "R&B's in aisle 2. Did you check there?" Flustered, I showed the collection of albums in my hand. "Yes, I checked over there, but I couldn't find it. Look, there are all these albums, but none of them have End of the Road on them. It's their most popular song. Why isn't it on any of them?" The clerk sighed. "I have no idea. I don't listen to that stuff." I should have been able to tell from the spiked dog collar and nose piercing. This burnout was definitely more of a Nirvana type, who probably couldn't tell Boyz to Men from the Backstreet Boys. "Well, is there anyone that works here that does listen to it?" I asked, exasperatedly. The clerk blinked a single protracted blink, like I was getting on his nerves. "Shift changed in 15 minutes. Maybe you can ask the next guy." I wordlessly left a stack of CDs on the counter and walked to the PacSun across from FYE to kill some time. After admiring a Paul Frank belt for a few minutes, I realized this was a dangerous endeavor. If I spent all of my money here, I wouldn't be able to afford the CD. Knowing I had to stay on mission, I crossed back over to the FYE. I was sure that 15 minutes hadn't passed yet. When I got back into the store, I saw that the clerk behind the counter had changed. Nose piercing wasn't there anymore, replaced by someone a bit older, with a less threatening aura. Had the shift change already happened? Oh well, I was here for answers, not to question the staff's timekeeping. I approached the counter once again, asking the same questions. I noticed that the clerk looked rather tired. "So, do you know where I can get the album? Maybe you have some extra copies in the back?" "In your universe, that song only exists on the Boomerang soundtrack." "What?" I shook my head. "Does everyone that works here get off on messing with kids? My money's as good as anyone's," I shouted. The clerk leaned in closely, resting on the counter. "I'm not messing with you. In this timeline, End of the Road was written for the Eddie Murphy film Boomerang, and it appeared on the movie's soundtrack, but not on a studio album. If you want a copy of that, you can check the soundtrack section, aisle 8. I had never even heard of the movie Boomerang, and I certainly didn't want to buy its soundtrack. But if what the clerk was saying was true, that meant that the song did exist on a studio album, in another timeline. I decided to indulge the fantasy a bit. So you're saying the end of the road exists on a studio album in a different dimension? How is that possible? The clerk looked up and thought for a moment. Come with me. I followed the clerk to aisle 2, where I had found the Boyz II Men albums initially. Look closely at this album cover. What do you see? The clerk held up a copy of Cooley High Harmony, Boyz II Men's debut album. A Boyz II Men CD? Obviously. But look closer. What do you see in the background? A building? Some kind of arch? Right. The Arc de Triomphe in Paris, also known as the end of the first road. My head was spinning from being taken for such a ride. The first road? What do you think the 2 in Boyz II Men stands for? Before letting me answer, the clerk continued, and don't tell me you think it stands for the transition from a young boy to a grown man. I've heard that so many times now it'll drive me insane if I hear it again. Okay, so what does it stand for then? The clerk began to recount a tale like a group of Girl Scouts sitting around a campfire. Long ago, at the beginning of Boyz II Men's recording career, there was a 5th member. But the producers didn't think that the 5th member could harmonize well enough with the rest of the group. Or at least, that's what they told the rest of the boys. So they tried to give him the axe. The universe that you live in, the one where the producers successfully sacked Michael McCary, and where the group decided to take their album cover photo in front of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, is known as the Men universe. You see, what the producers knew, but the rest of the boys did not, was that having a 5th boy would tip the scales, resulting in an uneven boys to men ratio. With 2 boys and 2 men, we are at equilibrium, yin and yang, you see? But with a 5th member, that ratio would inevitably be thrown off balance. In which direction, it doesn't really matter. The clerk paused for a second to let it all sink in. So as I said, your universe, which we call the Men universe, is the one where the boys to men ratio is in equilibrium. The universe that I'm from, the Boyz universe, is in a state of perpetual imbalance. And in that universe is where you'll find the Times Square version of Cooley High Harmony, the one that features End of the Road. The Times Square version? I asked, puzzled. The end of the second road, where the boys successfully fought to keep McCary in the group and chose Times Square over Paris for their album cover photo. Tired of being jerked around, I volleyed back a flippant retort. Well, I want the Times Square version, so I guess I'll just have to jump timelines then. I can't let you do that, the clerk said, scratching at the neckline of their collared uniform shirt. I couldn't help but notice the small port wine birthmark on their clavicle. The clerk looked at me quizzically, yet all-knowing. Oh, this? The clerk said, motioning to the birthmark. Looks familiar, doesn't it? A lot like the one you have, right? I froze. True, I had a similar birthmark at the same spot. But how could the clerk have seen it? It was the middle of winter, and I was wearing a turtleneck. I need to let you in on one last thing. You see, this isn't the first time you've tried to bring the Times Square version into the Men universe. This isn't the 10th, or the 20th, or the 1000th time. It's happened millions of times, across millions of timelines. Each time you succeeded, each time you sent that timeline into perpetual disarray, increasing the amount of entropy in the universe each time. If you were to continue unchecked, it would have disastrous consequences. You see, you, that is, I, that is we, exist in the Boyz universe as well. We have the same wants and desires, same hopes and dreams. When I was your age, I went on a search for the Paris version, and it brought me here, to your world. And when I got here, when I saw how such paradise was being maintained, untainted by the knowledge of the Times Square version, I knew that I could not let you, me, go through with it. There's no saving where I'm from. Your timeline is our last hope. The clerk pulled out a box cutter from their apron pocket. Don't move. don't scream. Complying to their demands, my eyes darted around frantically. There was no one else in the store, no one to signal to for help. Okay, okay, I whispered. I don't want the CD anymore. Just let me go. Tears well up in my eyes. Please. It's not that simple, the clerk replied. That's just not how the universe works. Somewhere along the line, you would doubt your memory that this ever happened, and you'd go looking for the Times Square version out of curiosity and nostalgia. It's happened before, innumerable numbers of times, in innumerable numbers of timelines, in innumerable numbers of ways. It's out of your control. The clerk sniffed. I'm sorry. The clerk motioned for me to follow towards the back room. Thinking frantically, I had a revelation. If you kill me, you'll die too, I whispered as loudly as possible. That's right, said the clerk. Remember what I said about the two roads earlier? This is the end of the road, for both of us. Die with me, and we can turn both of our worlds into utopias. At that point, my fight or flight instincts must have kicked in, because without thinking, I whipped around and bolted, past the clerk, past the racks filled with CDs, toppling over a candy display on the way out. Ran and ran, till I saw a mall security guard, and tearfully told him what had happened. He called the police, and they took me into custody. As I found out later, the clerk had apparently been stalking me for months, after having seen me while they were chaperoning at that very same dance where I had my first slow dance to End of the Road. They had even gone so far as to get a tattoo of my birthmark as some kind of twisted tribute to bring us closer together as one. They sentenced him to a lifetime in an asylum, and that's where he's been ever since. I'm 35 now, and my life has been pretty much normal. There's just one thing that started bugging me recently. While I was recounting this story, I did some research about Boyz II Men out of curiosity, and a line in their Wikipedia page intrigued me. A revamped Cooley High Harmony was reissued during 1993, with End of the Road added as a special bonus track. I'm thinking about trying to get a hold of it.